So let's turn our attention to price ceilings now. Price ceilings. So remember, the ceiling is like as high as you can go. So this is the government setting a price, a maximum price in the market. So a legal maximum price for a good or service. And so again, we can think about two different scenarios. Just like price floors, we'll draw two different markets, or the same market, two different scenarios, I should say, price and quantity, price and quantity. Let's say we're looking at bread. We have a supply curve, a downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply, downward sloping demand curve, and we have this old original equilibrium. Pen's dying a bit, so let's use green. Price and quantity. So let's say this was like $1.50 for a loaf of bread or something like that. There's some quantity here. So this is the same thing where we have a price of $1.50 for a loaf of bread or something like that. $2, $1.50 for some kind of bread. And so the price ceiling is a legal maximum. So let's imagine the government comes along and says, well, the legal maximum you can charge for bread is $4. So PC for price ceiling. Well, this is higher than what's currently being charged on the market. So supply and demand forces in this competitive market are coming to an equilibrium price of, let's say, imagine it's $1.50. And the government's saying, well, the maximum you can charge is $4. That's not going to affect the market whatsoever. So this is going to be non-binding price ceiling. And this is because the price ceiling is above the equilibrium price. So whenever this price ceiling the government sets, this price control the government sets, this price ceiling, this maximum price, if that's above what's currently being charged in the market, there's going to be no effect on the market. So this is what happens when there's a non-binding. The price will remain at 150 and the quantity will just remain at whatever it is, Q star here. But now let's say the government says, well, actually, consumers are really angry. They say the price of bread is too high. We want to help out people, so we're going to say the maximum you can charge for bread is $1. So let's say this price floor is now equal to $1. So consumers might be thinking this is great. This is, now I only have to pay $1 for bread. But let's think about what the consequences of this are according to our theory here. So at this price of $1, this is the quantity supplied. This is how much suppliers are willing to supply. This is how much consumers are willing to purchase for that price. So notice that we have excess demand at this price. Remember, just like in supply and demand, we said any price below equilibrium price is going to have excess demand. So here's this excess demand, and so what's going to happen is that the quantity exchanged on the market is going to go down because firms are only willing to supply this much. So it's going to be the minimum of QS and QD, which in this case is QS. And so consumers are there's actually going to be a shortage of bread. People, at $1, people really want to buy this much bread, but only this much is willing to be supplied. So we're going to have this shortage of bread. So this is going to be a binding price ceiling. Because PC is less than P star. And we're going to have all these consequences. So consumers are going to be the most likely ones who want this in, because they want the price of bread to be lower. But turns out they don't get much better off, because all of a sudden the amount of bread in the market has gone down. There's going to be this shortage of bread. So you go into the store now, and it's going to be really hard to get bread, because all the shelves will be empty because the quantity demanded is so much more than the quantity supplied. So there's going to be shortages, which means like there'll be lineups. There could be discrimination. There's a shortage of things. All of a sudden, sellers can choose who they want to sell this product to, and so they can like the look of one person but not another. So we could get some discrimination happening and things like that. Now, again, we can think about, there's a shortage for bread, and these sellers are thinking, well, if I could sell it for $1 legally, but I know that everyone wants this. There's this shortage of bread in the market, so I know that everyone wants this bread. So what if I tried to sell this illegally? How much would people be willing to pay for this much bread? Well, this is the amount they're willing to supply. So QS, remember, willingness to pay is related to the demand curve. So this is how much people are willing to pay for this much supply, quantity supplied. And so this is going to be the black market price. In this case, we take the amount that suppliers are willing to supply, and we figure out what's the maximum people are willing to pay for that. Well, willingness to pay is this demand curve. And so we're just going to go to the height of the demand curve at that QS, and that's going to be our black market price. All right, so let's just quickly recap price ceilings. So they're a legal maximum price for a good or service. They can be non-binding or binding. They're going to be non-binding when the price ceiling, this maximum price, is above the equilibrium price. Because that's like the government saying this is the maximum you can charge, but we're already charging less than that anyway. So there's no effect on the market. Now over here we have a binding price ceiling. And that's going to take place when this price, should be ceiling, maybe I said floor there, when this price ceiling is below the equilibrium price. So all of a sudden, the equilibrium in the market was $1.50 before, but now the government's saying the maximum you can charge for bread is $1 per loaf or something like that. And now, so this is going to be a binding price ceiling that's going to change the market. So at this price ceiling, this binding price ceiling, quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded. So we have excess demand. So at that price, there's a shortage of bread. This shortage of bread is going to cause like long lineups as people wait for bread to be put on shelves. Think about what happened with things like toilet paper during COVID. Everyone's like waiting for it to come back on the shelves, and immediately it's going away. We're going to have discrimination. So people that do have bread or toilet paper or whatever we're talking about might choose who they want to sell it based on whatever they want. And we also could get these black markets popping up. And so we saw this with things like toilet paper and COVID, and hand sanitizer and things like that with COVID, whereas people would try to sell them in the black market for a higher price. So they knew there's a shortage of them, and so they're trying to charge a black market price for a higher price for them. And so to figure out the black market price here, we figure out what the quantity supplied is, how much firms are willing to supply, and we just go to the height of the demand curve at that. And that's going to be way up here in this case, and that's the black market price.